I saw him in a screen when he's doing the screen test before we had to all get in front of the camera. We're in New Orleans, and I had to hold a gun this way and do this, and then he came up looking like Bela Lugosi, and it was amazing. It was incredible, and he's walking around, you're like, oh my God. But then you see him all like, because he goes through so many different phases of Dracula, and then when I had my scenes with him and he's kind of a little messed up, it was terrifying. It was so easy to react. All you had to do was look at him and act. It was amazing. I saw the old ones, but also I was a Mel Brooks fan, so I saw like Dracula Dead and loving it. So Leslie Nielsen was like a version of Dracula for me. But like you see the Bram Stoker stuff, you see sexy Draculas, but for some reason Leslie Nielsen is the one that I probably saw the most because I was watching Spaceballs and I was watching Young Frankenstein and stuff like that. So my correlation with it is I was always kind of afraid of horror movies, so I would kind of keep them at bay until I got older, and then I started downloading all of them in my brain. I would say it's harder to find horror within your comedy. It's easier when you have your dramatic scene because, in my head, the drama needs to be released in some way sometimes. Sometimes it has to be the scene, but if my character is kind of a mess up and stuff like that, so if I see a place to kind of like, because I think the jokes hit really hard. Even when I'm doing improv, I can't just be funny, funny, funny. You have to give them something that's follow the line and then hit them and stuff like that. So for me, it's like definitely to find those moments to be comedic within the horror or like, the action or anything like that. And it was so fun. It was so fun to do. Amy Poehler had the best line in where she said, I've turned the character John Ralphio into like a little puppy where even when he pees on something like, oh, John Ralphio, like you can't get too mad. I try to do that. I try to make you feel the heart of the character enough where when they do something stupid or something bad, you feel for them and you're like, oh, it's kind of adorable. It's bad. Don't do that again, but it's kind of adorable. He's like so bad. Like he's trying to kill people. He's doing drugs. Like he's such a bad person where I think putting that element in there is really fun because you're like, how am I rooting for this terrible human being? But that's like, I think the fun of it. Yeah. Joan Foreman Schwartz, Joan, maiden name Foreman, married name Schwartz, was a music teacher for 50 years in the Bronx. One of my favorite human beings in the universe. Talk to her all the time. She has loved it. Also because like, I played Carnegie Hall. Like my improv shows played Carnegie Hall, and I'm playing Radio City in September. And it's like the idea that my mom could go into these venues that she had no money growing up, and we didn't really go to Radio City and stuff like that. But like we know what it feels like. It's amazing. To give her that is amazing. Her son is on the thing. Like it's been amazing. I remember when I did Carnegie Hall, my mom was like the mayor in there greeting everybody like it was her show. She's like, oh my God, yeah, it's my son. I know, it's gonna be great. So she's over the moon. And she'll be so happy, Jake, that you mentioned her in this interview. I got you. Yes, that's Con Air, Face Off, Raising Arizona as well. But then also when I got older, Adaptation was enormous. I remember, it's one of the very few movies I've ever in my life finished it and then go, whoa, 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 and started it from the beginning to see what I can pick up on now that I kind of know what the film is about. But he's a movie star. I mean, there's not as many movie stars anymore, you know what I mean? There's big vehicles, but it's like, there's not as many movie stars. I remember a couple of like actors that are really established, like, because there's so much social media and you see everybody and stuff like that, but man, he was it for us. And I remember I did a show with John Malkovich, and we got John Malkovich to watch Con Air with us so we can ask him questions during it, and it was the best thing in the universe. It was heaven. It was amazing. And I don't think he had seen it since the premiere. So it was amazing.
He's got, he's an incredible cinephile. He loves movies. He loves Dracula. He loves horror movies. As we were talking about what Dracula should look like just in general, for me, I wanted to synthesize stuff, whether it was the Bela Lugosi, the Christopher Lee, I wanted, Gary Oldman, and from the book, from the Stoker novel, I wanted, elements of that. So that's why you have a top hat in one scene. You have a cane. That's from the Stoker novel. The teeth, I wanted to kind of mimic the Lon Chaney Sr. London After Midnight, all sharp teeth, using Bela Lugosi's outfit and Christopher Lee's when Dracula gets bloodlust, we use those contact lenses that Christopher Lee had in the Hammer movies when he gets blood, the bloodlust. So part of it was just synthesizing stuff. When Cage came in, we had to sort of describe Dracula as like a rock and roll Dracula. We wanted it to kind of be really flashy and big. So, Cage came in and the rings, that's where we got the rings and the fur and all of the, kind of really, soft and tactile textures and that sort of thing in the costume. So that was, it was a lot of...
I just want to say I was absolutely essential to this process because I would go, that looks really cool. Yeah, we were doing camera tests, and Chris had set up this amazing like set, and they were smoking the area, and I had never really seen a director like go hard on camera tests like this. And Cage walked in, and it was like dark and creepy, and there were candelabras everywhere, and he was in costume, and it was like it just transports you, and just the way he walks, the way he turns his head, like. Everything was quintessential Dracula. It was phenomenal.
And I don't know if you stayed for the end credits of the movie, but in the end credits of the film, where you have some that you see some of the camera tests as the end credits play.
Yeah.
When the budget runs out, that's usually when we notice this stuff.
And usually it's after that, long after that.
I mean, splatstick humor's kind of been around for a long time, and movies like Sam Raimi's Evil Dead 2 kind of perfected, splatstick humor. So I think that there's like a natural connection between humor and horror, and I think even the way, just from a structural standpoint, the way you develop a scare and the way you develop a joke, oftentimes are the very same kinds of things. They're just you're sort of one is something that's shocking, one makes you laugh. But yeah, I mean, splastic horror has always been something that for me is I just some of my favorite movies have Shaun of the Dead and things like that.
Those jump scares and moments of terror in a film, like they take you off balance and they pull you out of yourself. That's one of the reasons why they're so appealing. And I think when you're in that zone, you can't help but laugh because you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened to me. So it makes the marrying of the genres like really possible and really work when it's done well, because that moment when you're laughing, you can kind of feel yourself like, am I going to be terrified here, or is this going to be funny? And there's like a nice sweet spot where those two feelings diverge that I think you can really kind of hit.
Yeah, and it's also like you sort of know that the filmmakers got you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You get that jump and you get that thing, and then you sort of you relax and you realize, yeah, they got me.
Well, the words "I am Dracula," I wanted to channel a little of the Transylvanian voice, but by and large, my favorite Dracula is Christopher Lee, who has a British sound. My father was the biggest influence for Dracula, who had a mid-Atlantic sound. What I didn't want to do was have a goofy Transylvanian sound in the role, so I thought my father, whom I channeled in a little movie I made called Vampire's Kiss, was a great starting point for the way this Dracula speaks. Let me explain something to you, okay?
But obviously you go back to the novel a lot to figure out how Renfield began as a character and as a person, and then the 31 film is brilliant because Dwight Frye's performance is so iconic. So stealing things from that when I can. I love his laugh, obviously, and that's such a piece of the character, so trying to pepper that in. But then this is also 100 years later, so I mean, that's very kind of you to say that they feel like bookends, because it's then thinking, how have these characters developed over that time, and that's what I love with what Nick did to it. He brings a lot of these two characters, they're together, but they love each other, and they also are tormenting each other, and there's so much hurt even in Dracula for what Renfield does to him, trying to escape him. So there's a lot to unpack emotionally, I think, between them.
Well, it was just more of a reaffirmation, if you will, that so much can be conveyed with voice and just your eyes, that even though I'm under 20 pounds of makeup, the performance still can come through with voice and eyes. That's really what I learned from it. We had a fantastic makeup artist, Christian Tinsley, and he's the one that really designed the look. But we both designed together that it would still manage to get some communication through the eyes, which is why I didn't want to wear too many contacts. I wanted the eyes to still talk.
I think for Renfield, when he's first under Dracula's control, there's a wildness and a craziness to him in the novel at times, where he's kind of losing a little bit of his senses. And I think for this story, I think he's that crazy. It's like the beginning of a love, when all your chemicals inside of your brain are playing up and you're not really sure what's going on. I think that chemical release has died down for him, so he's more subdued than those roles.
Well, I think it was more just really trying to find the tone. I'm trying to find this bullseye between comedy and horror, which I don't think has been explored that much. I was often thinking about American Werewolf in London, and that's a bullseye Chris McKay and I really wanted to hit. So I was always trying to be conscious of the tone of this particular piece. It's an R-rated fantasy, but it's hilarious, and that's a balance that you have to find. And thankfully, Nick is someone who has tremendous wit and comic timing, so we were able to riff off of each other. I was always thinking about that. Bad news, just stay off your cell phone. Don't Google yourself. Don't take phone calls. Just be on set and focus.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, just self-preservation a little bit as well, right? Kind of worrying too much about yourself instead of the character.